Hey everyone, this is Sal. Today I am going to be talking about Clip Studio Paint, which is my main workhorse and what I do pretty much all of my work on. Um, we're going to be talking specifically about the clone tool, which I feel a lot of people don't know about, even people who have been using Clip for a long time. I'll also be talking about filter effects a little bit, photo bashing, and even a little bit about atmospheric perspective. So without further ado, let's get started. The general idea of what I want to do is to populate this space back here with a hill or a mountain, something just to give it a little bit more pizzazz. But rather than draw it in, which is obviously perfectly doable, I want to give it a little bit more texture. And one of the easiest ways to do this is photobashing. Photobashing is when you take an existing photograph and you clip elements out of it, add other elements in. It's basically playing collage with different photographic elements. One quick side note, please make sure that the photos that you are using are either your own or are Creative Commons photos. You don't want to be doing this with anything that is licensed for obvious reasons. However, this can be a really good way to do work quickly, or even just to add a little bit more dimension to your piece. Now, you want to make sure that whatever you're doing is still going to fit in with the style of your art in particular. Obviously, it's going to look a little out of place if you're doing, super cartoony work and then you just pop a photograph in there. But I'm going to show you guys how I use this method to just save a little bit of time and still make it work with the piece. All right. So one thing about Clip Studio is that it is very powerful as a drawing program. It marries a lot of elements that can be found in Paint Tool Sci, which is another really popular drawing program, and Photoshop, which I would argue is not as much of a drawing program as people think it is. It is at its heart for photography, but it does have some really cool tools. And this program here, Clip Studio, is a lot cheaper than Photoshop, a lot more powerful than Sci, and has some really cool elements that combine the two. Okay, so we're going to work on putting some hills in there. We need a good photo first. So I have this Creative Commons photo. Let's see here, put it in that layer. As you can see, it's the same pagoda as back here. Obviously, I've used filters on this to edit it a little bit to make it fit in. But I already have the pagoda, and I'm going to actually use this hill in the background. So let me show you how we do that. First off, I'm going to remove some of this excess that I'm not going to need. So take out this portion here that it's not going to be useful for me. And first thing I'm going to do is go to my lasso fill tool. This is in the section for figures, I believe. Yep. And I have this hotkeyed. And the lasso fill tool is by itself really powerful, and I wish more drawing programs had this. What it does is you select a color. Whatever you lasso is going to fill it with that color. So pretty genius. There is a lasso erase tool. That is perfectly doable. However, I like to be able to switch back and forth pretty quickly, so I usually stay with lasso fill. And how I do that is by selecting transparency. And I'll show you what I mean by that. If you go over to the eyedropper, you should see two options: pick up color from layer and color picker. If you select pick up color from layer, anything that is on its layer you're going to be able to pick up from. Now, what it doesn't explicitly tell you, but is super useful, is if you select anything outside of that layer. So right now, the only thing on this layer is that photograph. If I select outside that photograph, if you go down to the color, you'll see that the little checkerboard is now highlighted. That checkerboard is transparency. So anytime that I want to select transparency, all I have to do is select an area that doesn't have any pixels on it on that layer. So That lets me go back to lasso fill, and now anything that I lasso is filled with transparency, essentially erasing it. And that is a huge time saver. So I'm going to go ahead and take out some of this bottom part that I'm not going to need. Oh, another really cool trick. If you select one point and then go around and then go to another point and then just release, it will snap between the two. This is a really quick way to make straight lines. Anyway, went ahead and did that. I also don't need this blue, this area of the sky. So I could go just outline everything, and that's perfectly doable. I'm going to see if I can select that color specifically. So to do that, I need to go to select color gamut. For me, that's Control G. All of these shortcuts you can set yourself. And when I select that blue, down here there's an error margin of color, so mine's kind of high right now, but you'll see that it is selecting everything pretty close to that blue. Select OK. And if I remove that by either delete or down here at the selection bar, it's like the little loading bar thing, a little sun, that will clear that selection. So now very quickly I have taken out most of the sky. Don't worry about these little bits here, you can clean them up later. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and take this guy out too. So now we have our pagoda and the hill. Let me just add a layer underneath here so that that's a little less distracting, so we can see what we're doing. Now is when we come to the clone tool. And the clone tool is something that exists in Photoshop, but for some reason is pretty well hidden in Clip. It is actually under the blur category. It may be in just your blend category itself. I've moved it over to its own thing. In order to do that, all you have to do is select it, drag it, I can put it back over there, but I can drag it up in the subtool, and then it creates its own little subtool category. So we're going to do that. It's called the copy stamp. And what this essentially does is allows you to select one area, move your cursor, and wherever you end up drawing, it's going to slowly move that selection along with you at a fixed distance. So first we have to set its target. To do that, you press the Alt key and click whatever area you want it to start copying from. So now you'll see as I make my way across the image, it is going to be taking that targeted selection and copying it where my brush is. Now, one thing to be aware of is it is a fixed distance, and if you just keep going, there you go. You are going to eventually copy over what you just drew over, and that's not what we want. Maybe that is what you want, but in this case it's not. So the best method for this, make my brush just a little bit smaller, is to continuously, with small, short strokes, go through and also occasionally retarget it. So go over back to an area that you've worked on and Alt-click to set its target once again. So doing that, we are copying this tree texture. You can come over here, use that one. And this is going to let us keep that organic texture that we want from the trees. Obviously, it's going to start to look a little bit, well, like a repeated pattern. But if you're careful and you spend enough time, you can make it look pretty organic just by going through any area that looks repetitive. You can go in and copy once again. And remember that this is just a normal brush. It has brush settings over here that you can specify. You can play with that. You can even go up and duplicate the copy stamp so that you can have multiple versions. Maybe you want one that has a hard edge. As you see, this one has a soft fuzzy edge on it, which is fine for my purposes, but if there is something that you want to change about it, you can. So let me just finish up doing this. And you know what? I actually don't want to go over that edge, so I'm going to go over to Lock Transparency Pixels. There we go. Now, even when I get close to the edge, it's not going to go over. Okay. And I know that this is going to be in the background, far away. I don't need to worry about it looking perfect. I just want the texture. I'm going to take this layer and pull it back. It's now behind this layer here with the hedge in the beginning. There we go. And honestly, I could leave that as it is. It does look like it fits okay, but I'm gonna give it a little bit of a filter treatment just to make it look a little less like a photograph, because if you zoom in, it does look like it doesn't match. Okay, so what we're going to do now is apply some filters to it. The newest version of Clip added some cool textures and filters that you can use. There is now an artistic filter, which is also something that Photoshop had. And I'm still learning how this works. But like any of these, it's just a matter of playing with it and seeing what you like. There is a preview on here, but I think it's a little bit slow. But we just want to... Yeah, I don't think that's what I wanted. Filters are a lot of just playing. But you can put noise on it, which is just a kind of static pattern. Let's see if I can do what was making that weird little blur. I don't want that blur. Is that? No. You'll see, like, it's there's a lot of different things that you can do. Let's reset that for now. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. But maybe not what I want. Tell you what, though. I like that solution, but it's not exactly what I want. But I'm going to copy it, go back to our original. I could also have duplicated that in order to make edits to just one. Paste that one in and lower the opacity on it just a little. That's pretty cool. All right. So now I want to address the color just a little bit. There's multiple ways I could do this. I'm going to do kind of the cheap, dirty method of overlay. So it's a new layer over this, the background. I'm going to clip it. So now anything I do to this layer will only affect what we're working on. Pick like a blue color, and we're just going to airbrush. That's pretty saturated. I don't know if I want it that saturated. But rather than just nitpick, try and find the right color, let's open the hue, saturation, luminosity menu. For me, this is Control U. However, you can also get this by going to Edit and Corrections, Tone Corrections. So this lets me kind of play, slide around some of these. Yeah, that'll work. Okay. What I could do just to make it look even further away, make sure that it is no longer transparency locked, which it is not. Let's go to blur, Gaussian blur, just to soften those edges a little bit, because this is farther away. We're not going to be able to see as much detail. Okay. So that's pretty good. I think that I want to have an additional hill behind it just to give it a little bit more depth. So what I can do is just drag that up to duplicate it. And on the one behind, I'm gonna move this just over here. Whoop. You will see that any edits that you make are going to be made on any portion that is within the canvas at that time. So that's a little bit of a mistake, but we can work with that. Actually pull it back. And let's mesh transform. So to do that, you would go to transform and mesh. I have mine also hotkeyed. And this is going to let me actually transform using this mesh here. Now be careful, the mesh transform tool does take quite a bit of CPU. So if you're going to be using that on anything big, I would advise saving quickly beforehand. Okay, and on this, now we are going to make it recede a little bit further into the background. And for this, we're going to be using something called atmospheric perspective. The general concept of atmospheric perspective is that for any distance away from the viewer, you are also looking through a certain volume of air. And air is full of particulates, it's full of dust, it's full of color essentially. So as you look at things in the distance, and you can actually see this when you look at a mountain, it is going to become closer to the sky color, and it's going to become less saturated and less detailed. So all I did was make a new layer, took the sky color. Oh, and make sure that if you are trying to select a color that is no longer on that layer, that you go back and select color picker instead of select from layer. So now I can grab that sky color and just airbrush that on top, lower that opacity just a smidgen, and you'll see that now this second hill is further away, creating that sense of depth. I'll go ahead and flatten that down. All right, so now we have our hills. They've got an interesting texture to them. We can do another amount of Gaussian blur or color filters to them. But for now, I think that's about what I wanted. And you'll see that the difference that it makes, creating a sense of scale and depth to the image as a whole. So I hope that this was helpful for y'all. Yeah. So I hope that this was helpful for y'all, and that you found something about Clip Studio that you didn't know, or something about art technique that you didn't know before. And I really hope that you try some of these techniques out for yourself. Clip Studio, again, is a really powerful tool. I would say wait for it to go on sale. There are very frequent sales. If you follow them on Twitter, you will be able to get notified of their various holiday sales to pick that up and give it a good try. So if you want to see more content like this, please let me know. And thank you again to all my patron supporters for making this sort of content possible. Y'all are awesome, and I'll see you in the next video.